Shock Piece: The Search for Freedom, a novel by C. Nguyen. Chapter 30. D-Day, May 15th, 1978. Today was D-Day. Trin got up the moment Mother touched her lightly on her shoulders. She had slept fitfully and was waiting anxiously in the darkness for the signal. Kim was already up as well. The sisters averted their eyes from each other, avoiding all communications that might break the thin layer of calmness each tried to display. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. The air was cool, with a touch of dampness like most early mornings in the rainy monsoon season. A few noisy scooters were passing the house, invading the stillness of the empty streets, which would be flooded with traffic in a couple of hours. Light was scarcely visible outside when Trin peeped through a little hole in the rustic iron folding doors, which were typical of most houses in Vietnam then. She was ready, out of bed, and quickly dressed in a simple outfit like a village girl with black satin pajama pants and a white peasant blouse. The most identical outfit that most of the girls and women in their group were wearing that day. "Oh, I'm so excited," Trin told Kim, "but I'm scared too." Kim nodded her head. "Yeah, me too." Trin then left her sister alone and walked to the front trellis door. Pressing her nose against its little holes, she breathed in the fresh air of the early morning. She was not allowed to open it yet, but she loved the crisp, clean oxygen in the air, now without smoke and fume, later from traffic pollution. Trin hated the smell as her nose was very keen. Making a 90-degree turn, she looked eagerly at the old cuckoo clock hanging on the wall of her family lounge, waiting for the time to depart. That clock had been there ever since she could remember, something from the house that she was going to miss, Trin thought, mingling with the sadness of saying goodbye to the house she had been living in for an entire 16 years, and the unforeseen adventure of getting out of the country was an unexplained butterfly feeling in her stomach. The family had been planning this escape for almost half a year. Today, she was about to embark on an adventure. Excitement was very much in the young girl's mind at the time. The dangers at sea and the unknown fatalities of many other boat people were meaningless to the 16-year-old. After 3 years under the communists, she was relieved to be leaving the country. "Are you ready, Trin?" Mother asked. "Yes, Mother, I'm ready." They were the first group to leave. Kim and V, her other sister, would be next. The family was divided into groups this morning to go to the station to catch a bus to Cần Thơ, the rendezvous, where they would be meeting again to board small dinghies to the larger vessel further out. They left their house in pairs, starting at the crack of dawn, then at half-hour intervals. Mac was the last to leave. Trin's older brother, Nguyen, had already gone to the rendezvous 2 days ago. Luke, her younger brother, had been disguised as a busboy on the boat since last month. Juan, her older brother, had boarded the boat a few months ago. Her father had also been on board as a boat keeper since the day they had bought the vessel. This was a one-off chance. If anything were to go wrong, the whole family might be left homeless and could not return to Saigon to live. "Yes, Mother," Trin repeated, seeing that in her preoccupied state of mind, Mother did not hear her reply. "Here, carry your own bag. Take good care of it." Back to her senses, Mother then handed Trin the small bamboo-woven hamper. There were not many things in it, just some of her clothes. Trin swiftly slipped her small address book inside. Mother would not be pleased, as they had to avoid suspicion at all cost. She had moved most things down to the boat previously in her many trips during the organizing period. Mother had already booked a familiar motorized rickshaw to bring them to the bus station. He was waiting outside with his motor running noisily, which made Mother wince for fear of being noticed too much. The motorized rickshaw was a rear-engine operated open vehicle, with the driver's seat on top of it, behind the passenger seat. He stepped down from his high seat with the steering handlebars on top of the engine and made a gesture to help Mother carry our bags. but Mother waved him aside dismissively. They hopped onto his vehicle, trying to get clear of their house as quickly as possible. Drin looked at her house for the last time, trying not to cry. Her excitement in the early hours was replaced by her anxiety of saying goodbye to everything she had known all her life. The mid-morning of April 1975, when she had witnessed the fall of Saigon, was still fresh in her mind. She had stood there in silence, eyes wide in shock, with many others in front of their house. The impact of seeing the bi-colored red and blue flags with the center yellow star of the Vietnamese communists, once their enemies, so close to home, was frightening. The image of the flag flying on the North Vietnamese army tanks, which looked strangely unfamiliar from afar, then approaching menacingly, was still vivid in her mind. She could still see the painful, disbelieving looks of many adults. They were swiftly exchanged for a blank, emotionless stare toward the parade of victory from the North Vietnamese army. The impact of the shock in that first few hours was made even more unnatural by the peculiar silence in the air. All that had left an unusually powerful image, disturbing to a young girl. 3 years of cruelty had passed since then. Drin was so glad to get away today, to escape to the free world. Her once beloved country was no longer a dear place in her heart. School was not the place for a young mind to learn new theories and practice common science. Most time was spent on political subjects and on mimicking the phrases of Karl Marx, Lenin, Mao Zedong, and Ho Chi Minh like parrots. Grades were based not only on how smart you were, but how well the student absorbed the political propaganda, and without an A or B in the latter subject, there was no chance of gaining an A or B overall. From kindergarten kids to university undergraduates, all had to pass this stage before being able to gain places in school or universities. She was so sick of being told what to worship and of learning fabricated history that even a young child had found hard to believe. A few droplets of dew from the dense foliage of trees along the curb landed on her hair and startled the girl. The motorized rickshaw carrying Mother and Drin passed her high school. It brought her mind back to the present. The young girl was awash with emotions. Her small body was not yet fully developed. Her face was round, and the jaw was strong, with short, tapered hair around the neck. She sat beside her mother, sharing the same narrow seat. Young as she was in appearance, Drin had matured more than her age in other aspects. Sweet 16, the most acclaimed stage of a maturing young woman, was lost in her life. The carefree, light-hearted moments were scarce. Laughter was mingled with bitterness, a kind of black humor. There were no candles and flowers to celebrate this coming of age, but images of war and the brutal reality of daily life to deal with. There was no doubt that her virtue was as pure and crystal clear as a mountain spring, but there were sad thoughts and harsh, hurtful images in those troubled years that lingered longer than necessary. She changed her position slightly and glanced backward, all the while the rickshaw went past the entire length of the school. The tall iron gates were locked, looking forbidding and austere. The high wall stretching along the perimeter and facing the street divided the worlds into two, theory and practice. The school had an air of mystery at that moment, as the trickle of light in the early morning was not enough to penetrate the darkness, and that also left an impression of indifference. She felt sadder. Drin wanted to look closely at her high school for the last time. She wanted the rickshaw to stop so she could come near the gates. Everywhere she looked was for the last time. She was leaving the country for good. She wanted to memorize the streets, the trees, the leaves, the background, the surroundings, and her friends, her people. She would like to keep everlasting pictures in her heart. Her schoolyard was a sweet memory in her heart, but even the subjects that were taught there were strange to her after the fall of Saigon. Her school was not as dear to her as she remembered it in the past, but she remembered the same dear tiny leaves from tamarind trees, yellowish in color, falling, falling on the ground on windy days, and there were jacaranda trees with early blossoms of reddish flowers, bright in the summer sun and scattered about the paths. They were the two most popular trees found in most schools of the South. Oh, how she wished to see her classroom for the last time. It was on the first floor, looking directly down at the main assembly area, almost on the straight line with the school flagpoles. Damn, Drin suddenly recalled. She had forgotten to return the school books. It was the last week of school, and Drin wanted it not to be noticed that she did not return the books earlier in fear of being discovered. As ordered strictly by Mac and her mother, she was not supposed to disclose their secretive plan of escape to anyone else. Drin only told 4 people, her closest, best friends, and repeatedly asked them to keep it secret for her. See, she did not tell the whole class, of course. Drin reassured herself that she had obeyed her mother in some degree. She could not resist giving Lan her fountain pen, Swung her diary, Wan her handkerchief, and Tao her book of pressed flowers as souvenirs. The girls had cried together and whispered their farewells a few nights before. "You're so lucky, Trin. I'm going to miss you. Please write to us as soon as you can, and please be safe. Don't worry, your secret is secure with us, right, girls?" They all nodded in agreement. "Be careful, Trin. I've heard many sad stories. I'll pray for you." "Oh, I wish I were you. Your family is so lucky to be able to organize their escape. Everyone is wishing the same thing. Don't forget to write to us, Trin, please." For the entire time of organizing the trip, they did their best to divert suspicion by going about their normal daily chores without any deviation in their activities. Drin still had to queue for necessities with coupons and ration books as before. Although the time spent queuing under the scorching sun was very long, Drin had felt as if it went faster. She did not feel as frustrated when she went home empty-handed after 1 or 2 futile hours fidgeting in lines and was told that there was nothing available for her. She was going to escape. The girl started to daydream about the new life she was going to live. She would not have to queue for food anymore. She would be able to read her books and listen to her music as before. She would be free of propaganda, of absurd communist idealism, from restrictions on movement and speech, and of being under the control of her stomach. Oh, how she would love to be herself. She had to pretend to follow doctrines that went against her beliefs for the last 3 years. She could stop her play acting once she was out of Vietnam. She would return to her true self in the free world. Freedom was the dream of many boat people who tried to escape and were ignorant of probable death. They were very naive. Drin realized that now. After so many years had gone by after the day her family stepped onto the small boat in search of a new life, Drin always wondered at how simply and easily many of them, her family and others, thought about their escape. In her mind, it was as if once they got away from the Vietnam coast, there would be a welcome party waiting with open arms to help them reach their goal, showering them with love and attention. Drin thought of the open sea as literally as mild and docile as a giant river. How foolish of her. Mother held her hand lightly, pulling it to her lap, as if to stop Drin from fidgeting about. "We're almost there," she reassured Drin softly, her face serene, as if empty of thoughts. Poor mother, she was a figure of strength and femininity all in one. Drin knew that her mother was as anxious as she was, and she did not want to disturb her for fear of falling apart. Ji breathed deeply and steadily, keeping herself from shaking with anxiety. Her hand entwined with Drin's, the youngest of her brood of 7, and she was grateful for the body warmth emanating from the girl's closeness. The innocent face of her young girl, unaware of the danger ahead, touched her heart like a sudden throbbing pain. Looking away to dampen her feelings, she told herself to be calm. There was too much at stake to lose if she were to panic now. Ji's decision to leave the country was reinforced after her oldest daughter, Yang, escaped to Sydney, Australia, a direct journey from Vung Tau. She missed Yang and her granddaughter, Kate, dearly. It was the first time ever that Yang, the eldest of her children, was away from her. She was so far away. Ji sighed quietly. The thought of not being able to see the two of them again in her life was so unbearable that Ji had agreed readily when Max started talking about escape for the whole family. It was a risk she had to decide on alone, as Ji had become head of the family ever since her husband lost all interest in the devastated country and his surroundings after the fall. He became reclusive and left Ji to manage their lives. The sun was beginning to show its presence, glaring at her, heating the misty air and increasing the humidity rapidly. The streets were noisier and busier with traffic when they got closer to the bus station. At her feet was the small nylon hamper containing some food for them on this trip. Most of the journey preparations had been done a few weeks before, and everything was already aboard the boat. "Watch where you're going, bastard," the man growled angrily at the driver, his index finger pointing aggressively as he swirled around, avoiding the motorized rickshaw at the sharp turn. The driver quietly mouthed a "fuck you" in response before slowing down completely to a full stop at the busiest section of the station. G pulled out a wad of bills to pay him generously, but not over generously, to avoid raising the suspicion of the busybody onlookers. They were staring at them, curious at the two women who were tentatively stepping out onto the curb. They were different, she thought resignedly. It did not matter how much she tried to blend in to become a peddler like every other woman. She knew that she looked strangely out of character. Her voice was as soft and clear as a young girl. Her delicate skin was a betrayal to all the disguise she put on. Her language was polite and gentle, that kind that street vendors never used. They often had to ask her to repeat what she said and laughed amusedly, as if hearing those words for the first time. "What you say? Say it again," one would ask, and another one would mimic G's voice. "I beg your pardon?" Then they would roar in laughter uncontrollably. G remembered the beginning of her life as a peddler. She had become a traveler going to places along the highways from the southern point of Gamao to the highland of Van Dijk, a stretch of 600 kilometers that G had never dreamed of traveling alone in her previous life. With the help of her cousins, whose truck was a means to transport goods of various kinds back and forth between those places, G joined them and was able to bring food to her family by doing a similar exchange. Her trip was once every 2 or 3 weeks, and she had to live in the vehicle among the goods. The women had a tiny corner inside the truck, just big enough to stretch out to sleep at night. The men used the bottom of the vehicle as shelter in the dry season. In the rainy season, all 4 of them had to scramble into the limited space available. The stench of those sweaty men and the humidity in the confined space were the worst that G had to suffer in those longest nights. She was hardly able to breathe. Her hands and feet were calloused from carrying heavy baskets of goods containing rice, sugar, and fish sauce, and walking long distances in her sandals. Her skin darkened from many hours of harsh sunlight, but retained its delicate softness. As G was always careful in concealing her face from damaging UV rays. The change in appearance of a once beautiful, elegant, and street-shy woman was subtle, but G knew that her life had changed for good. A woman in her mid-40s, G had never ventured out of the door without her husband at her side before the fall of Saigon. She had never handled anything more than keeping the house and raising her children dutifully, like an Oriental woman of her time. A much protected wife and mother of an affluent family, G was totally aghast at being thrown into dealing with almost everything in this new life. G realized that she had to adapt and had gathered all her courage, becoming a street vendor whose profit was just barely enough to keep her children safely at home with enough food and necessities. "Are you hungry yet, Drin?" G asked her daughter. Drin was looking in fascination at the activities around the station. People were everywhere. Mother had emphasized many times at home, in the drill before the actual trip, that she must keep an eye on her belongings all the time, especially at the station where pickpockets and snatchers were quick to strike. Food stalls were selling a variety of cakes wrapped in dark banana leaves in many shapes and sizes. There were attractive steamed white pork buns, offering a delicious aroma and causing her stomach to growl hungrily. It was 7 o'clock now. She had been up at 5 and did not eat well at all the dinner before in her agitation at the coming adventure. "Yes, mother, what can I have?" she asked softly, not sure if she was supposed to have anything from the stalls, but wishing that she could. G smiled at her daughter, giving the young girl encouragement. Trin beamed with pleasure, happy at the thought of having a treat at this trying time. "That one?" She pointed toward the pork bun stall, opening her eyes wide and waiting for her mother's approval. She could not wait to hold one of those soft, fluffy white buns in her hands to feel its warmth and inhale its delicious, meaty flavor. G nodded, then hurriedly went after the girl as Trin sprinted to the stall at top speed even before her mother's nod completed its movement.